All right, in this lesson, we're going to take a look at function notation. Function notation is a way of writing functions, all right? So you can see right here, it's got f of x equals. So all this is saying is y equals 2x squared minus x plus 3, all right? So f of x just means y. It's just another way of stating y equals. We use function notation because sometimes we are looking at more than one function at a time, and this gives us a way to name each of our functions. The f is the name of the function, and then the x in parentheses is telling you what variable we are using for our independent variable. So all this is saying is just y equals, so don't panic over that. So the instructions here says determine the range of the function using the given domain. So they've given us our domain here. Remember, domain means your x values. So what they're asking you is to take these x values and figure out what the y values are using this function. So one way we can do this is we can do this by hand. So let's say that our first value is our -2 here, all right? So that means x is equal to -2. So that means in my function, I'm replacing all of my x's with a -2. So this would be 2 times -2 squared minus -2 plus 3, right? And then I would type this part in my calculator and see what that is. And so when I type that all in my calculator, let me show you what it looks like. I'm not going to worry about typing the f of -2 part. I am going to type in 2 parentheses -2, close it, squared, minus parentheses -2, and then plus 3. And when I press enter, it tells me 13. So this is telling me that when my x is a -2, my y equals 13, right? So that's one way of doing this, is going through by hand one by one. The other way is to use our calculator, because we just need to tell our calculator what our x value is, and then we can type in our function, or at least the expression from the function. So let's say we're doing this next one. We've got x is equal to -1, all right? So what we're going to do is in the calculator, we're going to tell the calculator what our x value is. We're going to say -1 store x, enter. Okay? So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to type -1 store x, enter. So now my calculator thinks x is a -1. And so now what I'm going to do is I am going to type in what my function equals, what my y equals, 2x squared minus x plus 3. All right, that's my next step. Type in my expression. So I'm not typing in the equal sign for this one. So I'm going to go back to my calculator, and I am typing in 2x squared minus x plus 3. And when I type it in, the calculator knows that every time it has an x, that means you're typing in a -1. And so it tells me that the answer is 6. So that means that when x equals -1, my y is equal to 6. Okay? Remember, f of -1 just means y equals 6 when x is a -1. All right, let's try another. My next number is a 0, so x equals 0. So we're going to do 0 store x, enter. So on the calculator, 0 store x, enter. So now calculator thinks x is a 0. And then since I'm using the same expression as earlier, I'm just going to go up and highlight it and press enter, and it copies it for me. And now when I press enter, it tells me that the answer is 3. All right, so when my x is 0, my y is 3. All right, and then my last number is when I have a 4, so x equals 4. So I'm going to do 4 store x, enter. So 4 store x, enter. I'm going to go up and highlight my function or my expression, press enter, and it tells me 31. So when f of 4, my number is 31. All right, so we found 4 values. We found 13, 6, 3, and 31. And it was asking us what is our range. Okay, so remember, range goes from least to greatest and no repeats. Okay, so same rule as when we were doing domain and range back in 2.1. So my smallest number is a 3, so that's what I'm going to start with. And then I have a 6, and then I have a 13, and then I have a 31. And so that right there is what they wanted to know. That is my answer for this problem. All right, so that's when they give you a domain. Now if I look at number 2, it says when x equals 3, f of x equals what? So they're saying y equals what when x equals 3. Okay, so this is just a way of rephrasing your problem. All right, so we've got this expression here, negative 2x plus 5. We're going to see what happens when I do 3 store x and press enter. So 3 store x, enter. That saves it in there. And then now I'm going to type negative 2x plus 5. And it tells me negative 1. So f of 3 equals negative 1. Okay, so I'm saying function f when x is a 3 will make the value of negative 1. If we were going to do this by hand, okay, we're going to replace every x we see with a 3. Okay, so it's negative 2 times 3 plus 5. And then I would see what that equals. That's negative 6 plus 5, which equals negative 1. All right, so you can do it by hand or you can use the calculator. Okay, example 3. Determine the domain of the function using the given range. So this time they told me my range. This time they told me the y values. Okay, and they're asking what does x equal. So now I'm going to put my y values here where we have f of x. Remember, this means y equals. So I'm going to start with negative 3. So instead of f of x, instead of y equals, I'm going to write negative 3 equals 3x minus 6. Now I have to solve this out, okay, because I'm trying to find x. I have a variable I need to solve for. So remember, we get x by itself. We're going to add 6 to each side. So that gives me 3 equals 3x. Divide by 3, and that gives me x equals 1. All right, so there is one of my solutions, one of my domain values. So next I've got a 1. So instead of y equals, I'm going to put 1 equals 3x minus 6. And it's the same steps. Add 6 to each side. 7 equals 3x. Divide by 3. And I get x equals 7/3. Okay. So that's another one. So I've got one more to do. I've got when x is a 5. Okay. So I'm going to do 5 equals 3x minus 6. So I add 6 to each side. That gives me 11 equals 3x. Divide both sides by 3, and that gives me x equals 11/3. And so there is my third value for my domain. All right, so it said to determine the domain. So to write my answer, my domain, using my squiggly brackets, I'm going from smallest to largest. Smallest value I have is a 1. If you weren't sure, you can change your fractions to decimals. So let's look. We've got 7/3 is one of ours, so that's about 2.3. And then the other one was 11/3, so that's 3.6. So I can see 2.3 is smaller, so 7/3 is going to come next. So 7/3, and then 11/3. Okay. All right, and then that is my domain. So when they give you the range, you replace the y, and then you've got to solve for x. If they give you the domain, you just plug it in for x and use that to find your y, to find your range. All right, so now here's some special cases. This is when they give you graphs or sets of ordered pairs. This does happen occasionally. So number 4 says, what is the range? So remember, they're asking, what does y equal? When the following relation has a domain of 2. So this right here is telling you x equals 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my points. Remember, in your points, the first number is x, the second number is y. So I'm looking for when this is a 2 for my first number. And I can see that here. So when that is a 2, I can see that y equals -6. Okay? So that's my range. My range is -6. So you can write it as y equals -6, or you can just have a -6. Okay? Either way works. All right, now on a graph, it says when x equals -6, f of x equals what? So this just means y equals what? So on my graph, I'm going to look for when x is 6. Okay? That's here. And so I'm going to find my function. So they intersect here. Okay? And if I look across, that's a y value of +6. So when x is 6, y is 6. My next one says x equals what when f of x equals -2. So this is saying y equals -2. Okay, so this time I'm going to go to when y is -2, and when I look, that happens, that intersects with my graph in 2 separate places, here and here. So that happens at -2 and at +2. So there are 2 answers there. X equals -2 and x equals +2.